They say you can't take it with you. We hear that all our lives, don't we? And they're right, of course. You can't pack your money or your car or your house into a little suitcase for the next life. The material things, the things we spend so much of our lives striving for, they all stay behind. But what if the most valuable thing you own isn't a thing at all? What if it's a story, a memory? A legacy woven not from dollars and cents, but from whispers of the past, from the courage of those who came before you, from the very essence of where you began. What if your real wealth was measured in love and resilience? My name is Elena. I'm a mother, a grandmother now, and for most of my life, I was the quiet keeper of my family's flame. And my daughter, my only child, once looked me in the eye and told me that the best gift she could ever give me was to die. She said it would be a relief, a solution, because then she could finally sell my house, liquidate all my junk, and she'd have some real capital, some real money to build the life she felt she deserved. She spoke those words to me. They hung in the air between us, sharp and final like shards of broken glass. It was the night before her 25th birthday. This isn't a story about revenge in the way you might think. Well, not the loud, angry kind. There was no screaming match, no dramatic slamming of doors. The revenge, if you can even call it that, was far quieter and, in its own way, far more powerful. This is a story about a different kind of treasure, one that so many of us have tucked away in attics and memory boxes and the deep, quiet corners of our hearts, but we forget to value in a world that shouts so loudly about net worth and possessions. If you've ever felt a hollow space inside, a feeling that there must be something more than the relentless pursuit of the next paycheck, the next promotion, if you've ever looked in the mirror and wondered, where do I truly come from? Whose blood runs in my veins? What stories do my bones hold? Then please come, take a seat at my table for a little while. I have a story to share, and I think you might understand. My whole life, my passion, my quiet obsession, has been our family's history. It wasn't just a hobby, something to pass the time on a rainy afternoon. It was a calling, a deep spiritual need to gather the fragments, to piece together the mosaic of our existence. I've spent decades, not just years, but decades, patiently, lovingly collecting the little, seemingly insignificant pieces of us. Old letters, their paper gone brittle and yellow, tied together with faded ribbons that were once a vibrant pink or blue. Recipes written in my mother's hurried looping cursive on the backs of old grocery lists, stained with drops of oil and tomato sauce. Photographs so old that the faces are starting to soften, to fade gracefully back into the paper, as if they're returning to the earth. And then there are the voices. I have little cassette tapes, relics of a bygone era, with the voices of my aunts and uncles, their laughter, their arguments, their songs, all caught in a fragile bubble of magnetic tape. I've digitized them now, of course, but I still have the originals. I can't bear to let them go. I'm not a rich woman, not in the way the world typically measures these things. My house, this home, is a small, simple, two-bedroom place on a quiet street where the trees are older than I am. There's no fancy European car sitting in the driveway, just a reliable, slightly rusty sedan that gets me from point A to point B. If you were to look at my bank account, the number you'd see there has never been one to make anyone's eyes go wide with surprise or envy. It's always been just enough. Enough for groceries, for the mortgage, for a little put aside for a rainy day. But I have always felt wealthy, incredibly, abundantly, blessedly rich. Because I am the keeper of our stories. I am the librarian of our lives. I know where I come from. I know the soil from which I grew. And I believed with every fiber of my being, with all my heart and soul, that this knowledge, this sense of belonging, was the most precious, the most enduring thing I could ever hope to pass on to my child. My own mother, Sophia, she was my inspiration, my North Star. She was the one who planted the seed in me. She came to this country, to America, with one single worn-out suitcase and a heart so full of fear and hope, I'm surprised it didn't burst right out of her chest. She was just 17 years old, a child, really. She left behind everything she had ever known, her parents, whom she would never see again, her tiny village nestled in the Carpathian Mountains, the smell of the lime trees in the summer, the taste of well water from the village pump, all for the hazy, distant promise of something better. She endured the long, terrifying voyage in the steerage compartment of a ship, surrounded by the smells of salt water, sickness, and desperate humanity. She arrived at Ellis Island, alone, her name changed by an official who didn't care to get it right. She found work in a garment factory on the Lower East Side, her fingers becoming raw and bloody from the relentless pace of the sewing machine. She didn't speak the language. She was lonely, oh, so lonely, that she told me the silence in her tiny rented room used to feel like a physical weight on her chest. But she survived. She didn't just survive, she thrived. She learned the language, word by painful word. She made a life. She met my father, a kind man from a similar background, and they built a family. And at our kitchen table, the linoleum worn thin in places, over cups of strong, sweet tea, she would tell me these stories. Not as stern lessons, you understand, not as you should be grateful lectures, just as memories, as gifts. The taste of the dark rye bread from her mother's wood-fired oven, the sound of the Orthodox church bells echoing through the valley on a cold, clear Sunday morning, the way her father would whistle a specific, lilting tune when he came home from the fields, a tune she would sometimes hum while she was washing dishes, her eyes looking at something far, far away. She wasn't just telling me stories, she was giving me my roots. She was handing me a map to my own soul, showing me the ground I was standing on. And I clung to those stories like a lifeline. They were my anchor in a world that often felt confusing and loud. When my daughter, Chloe, was born, I looked into her perfect, tiny face, and I knew with a certainty that shook me what my purpose was. This would be her inheritance. Not a trust fund, not a stock portfolio, not a piece of property. Her identity, a deep, unshakable sense of belonging that no one and nothing could ever take from her. A knowledge that she was part of a long, unbroken chain of people who have loved and lost and struggled and persevered. So I kept collecting. For her. Every letter that arrived from a distant cousin, every recipe card my mother handed me, every whispered piece of family gossip shared at a wedding or a funeral. I saved it. I organized it. I filed it away. It became my life's work, my magnum opus. It was all for her. As her 25th birthday approached, I decided the time was right. She was an adult, out in the world, and I felt she was finally old enough to truly appreciate the gift. I wasn't going to give her cash, which would be spent and forgotten, or a new gadget, which would be obsolete in a year, or a generic gift card to some department store. How could I? My gift was so much bigger, so much more profound than that. I was creating a digital family library, a virtual home for all of us, just for her. I bought a sleek new tablet, and on it, I painstakingly uploaded everything. Scanned copies of every letter, every birth and marriage certificate, every ship's manifest. Digital recordings of all the old voices from the cassettes, which I had cleaned up as best I could. An interactive family tree that went back 5 generations with little branches you could tap on to see photos and read stories. And her favorite, The famous secret recipe for our family's ciorba de peresuare, that delicious sour soup with the little savory meatballs that her bunica, my mother, used to make for her when she was a little girl. The smell of that soup cooking was the smell of love, of safety, of home. It was all there. The entire beautiful, complicated tapestry of who she was, where she came from, waiting for her to explore. But there was one final piece, the crowning jewel. The funding that my daughter would later so scornfully refer to, it was for a trip. One last momentous journey to complete the collection. Through years of correspondence, I had found him, the oldest living relative in the old country, my mother's cousin Alexandru. He was 98 years old, sharp as a tack, and still living in the very village, in the very house my mother was born in. My plan, my dream, was to go there, to that small village in Romania I had only ever seen in photographs, to sit with him at his own kitchen table, to film him with a good camera, to record his voice clearly, to have him tell the stories that even my mother didn't know, the stories from before the war, from before the Great Leaving. This trip, it was to be the final, beautiful golden bow on the most important gift I would ever give. It was the last piece of the puzzle, the final chapter of the book I was writing for her. The night before her birthday, I was at my dining room table, which was covered in a comforting chaos of old photos, my laptop, and a cup of tea that had gone cold. I was putting the finishing touches on the digital archive, adding labels, creating an intuitive menu. The front door opened and closed. Chloe came in. She was always so tired, so stretched thin from her high-pressure job in the city. She was a marketing executive, so focused on money, on success, on the next rung of the corporate ladder. She was beautiful, my Chloe, with her sharp, modern clothes and her intelligent eyes. But lately, those eyes always seemed to be looking at the next thing, never at what was right in front of her. She dropped her expensive leather briefcase by the door with a heavy, definitive thud. I was so excited, so full of my project, that I didn't read her mood. "Chloe, sweetheart, you're home late. You'll never believe what I just found. Come look at this," I said, my voice warm with excitement. I pointed to my laptop screen. "I just found the digitized passenger manifest from the ship your Bunica came over on, the SS Liberté. Her name is right here, see? Sofia Popescu, age 17. Can you imagine? Right there." She didn't even look. She just sighed, a long, weary exhalation that seemed to come from the very bottom of her soul. "Mom, not now. Seriously, I've had a day from absolute hell. The merger is falling apart, and my boss is breathing down my neck about quarterly projections. I just need a giant glass of wine and complete, utter silence." I was a little deflated, but I tried to connect, to pull her into my world. "Oh, I'm sorry, honey. That sounds awful. But just look for a second. This is the actual document. It's like it's like holding a piece of her in your hands. It makes it all so real." She finally turned, her face a mask of pure irritation. "Mom, why are you always wasting your time on this old junk?" "Junk?" I said, pulling back slightly. "It's not junk, Chloe. It's your history. This is your real inheritance. This is what matters." She let out a short, bitter laugh that had no humor in it. "My inheritance? This? Boxes of yellowed paper and a house in a neighborhood that's barely holding its value? This is why we're not a successful family, Mom. Because you're always living in the past. You're obsessed with dead people while the rest of the world is moving forward. My friend Jessica's parents just gave her $50,000 for a down payment on a condo in a fantastic building. What do I get? A recipe for soup?" My heart was pounding now, a sick, frantic rhythm in my chest. "Chloe, that's not fair, and you know it isn't. This is who you are. This soup, these stories, they're in your blood. Money can't buy that. It can't buy a sense of belonging. It can't tell you who you are." Her voice rose, becoming sharp and cold, each word a carefully aimed dart. "Belonging? I belong in a corner office, Mom. I belong in a penthouse with a river view. I don't belong in this museum of poverty and struggle. You want to know what a real inheritance looks like? You want to know what the best gift you could possibly give me would be?" I looked at my daughter, my beautiful, angry daughter, and my eyes were pleading. I felt the tears starting to well up, but I fought them back. "What, Chloe? What could I possibly give you that would ever be enough for you?" She looked me straight in the eye, her gaze steady and utterly devoid of the love I so desperately needed to see. Her voice was dripping with a venomous, terrifying clarity. "The best gift would be if you just died. Then I could finally sell this house and all this crap, and I'd have some real money to live my life." In that moment, I didn't feel anything. It was like someone had reached inside my chest, wrapped a cold hand around my heart, and squeezed until the light went out. The words were so cold, so calculated, so final. They didn't just criticize my gift, they rejected my entire life. My love, my reason for being. They invalidated my mother's journey, her sacrifice. They made a mockery of every story I had ever cherished. I just looked at her, this beautiful, successful, angry stranger I had raised, fed, clothed, loved with a ferocity that sometimes frightened me. And I felt my heart not break, but turn to ice, a deep permafrost cold that spread through my veins. I didn't say a word. I simply turned around, walked slowly up the stairs to my bedroom, and closed the door. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. The hurt was too profound, too fundamental for that. It was a quiet, cold, deadening thing. So I took quiet, cold, decisive action. I went to the phone, my movements mechanical. I called the airline. "Yes, hello," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I need to cancel a flight booking." "Yes, the one for next week. A full cancellation, please." "No, I don't wish to rebook. Thank you." I did the same with the hotel. Then I called the translator I had hired in the village and canceled his services. Next, I went to my computer. I opened the beautiful, intricate digital archive I had spent over a year creating. I selected all the files, and I moved them to an external hard drive. Then I deleted them from the tablet and my computer, emptying the trash. I watched the little icon disappear without a flicker of emotion. I got a large, sturdy lockbox from the basement, one my father had used for important documents. I began placing all the physical items inside. The letters, the photo albums, the recipe box, the USB drive with the digital copies, the cassettes. I placed them all inside, one by one. The final click of the lock was loud and final in the quiet morning room. I sealed her inheritance away, not out of spite, but out of survival. How could I possibly offer my heart, my life's work, to someone who had so clearly, so cruelly told me it was worthless? That afternoon, I drove to the mall, a place I rarely visited. I went to the most high-end department store there, all gleaming marble and hushed tones. I walked straight to the handbag section. I pointed to the most expensive, most generic, most beautiful designer purse I could see. It was sleek black leather with a subtle, recognizable logo. It was utterly soulless. It whispered of status, not of story. It said nothing about who we were, where we came from, what we had endured. It was perfect. I paid for it with my credit card, not even flinching at the price. I didn't get it gift wrapped. I put it in the store's simple, elegant shopping bag. That evening, we had a small, strained birthday dinner. I handed her the bag. Her eyes widened with genuine surprise and pleasure. She pulled out the purse. "Oh, Mom," she exclaimed, her voice bright and shocked. "A Louis Vuitton! This is amazing! Thank you! Wow, you finally, thank you so much." She got up and hugged me. It was a stiff, careful hug. I gave a small, tight smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Happy birthday, Chloe." She was so happy. She spent the rest of the dinner talking about the bag, about its quality, about how her colleagues would be so impressed. She thought I had finally seen the light, that I had finally come to my senses and understood what was truly valuable in this world. And in a way, I had. I understood with a devastating clarity that what I valued, what I considered priceless, she saw as trash, as an embarrassment. So I stopped offering her my treasure. I closed the museum. But a story is a living, breathing thing. It doesn't want to be locked away in a dark box. It wants to be told. It needs to be heard. It wants to connect, to resonate, to live on in someone else's heart. If my own daughter, my own flesh and blood didn't want them, didn't see their worth, well, maybe someone else did. Maybe the world was hungrier for truth and connection than I had realized. Maybe the world needed them more. A few weeks later, the numbness began to recede, leaving a dull, persistent ache in its place. I looked at the lockbox, and I didn't feel sadness anymore. I felt a strange sense of determination. I sat down at my computer. I created a simple, clean blog on a free platform. I started a podcast using a basic microphone. I didn't use my real name. I was just Elena, a grandmother, a keeper of stories. I called it Our Family Table because that's where the best stories are always told, isn't it? Over food, with loved ones, in the warm, messy, loving space of the kitchen. I decided I would share them. Not all at once, not as a grand gesture, but slowly, carefully. One story at a time. Like offering small, precious dishes at a long, leisurely meal. My first podcast episode, I was so nervous. My voice trembled a little. I said, "Hello, and welcome to our family table. Today, I want to tell you about a young girl named Sophia. It was the spring of 1952, and she was standing on the deck of a ship, watching the coastline of her homeland disappear into the mist. In her pocket, she had a single, dried Edelweiss flower from her mother's garden, pressed between the pages of a prayer book, and in her heart, a fear so big she thought it might swallow her whole. But she also had a secret recipe for kozanok, that sweet braided bread folded into a tiny square and tucked safely into her shoe. It was the only tangible piece of home she had left. And a funny, miraculous thing happened. People started to listen, slowly at first. A handful of downloads, then a few dozen, then hundreds. They found my little podcast. They read the blog posts where I would share a scanned letter and my translation. The emails started trickling in, then flowing. "You've helped me feel connected to my own grandmother who passed away before I was born," one woman wrote. "I never knew my roots. I was adopted, and your stories feel like a blanket, comforting me, making me feel like I belong to the human family," wrote another. "Thank you for reminding me what's important." It became a quiet hit. Not a viral, overnight sensation, but a deep, resonant, growing hum of connection. People were starving for this, for realness, for heart, for the truth of our shared human experience, the struggles and the triumphs that bind us all together. Then, about 8 months after I started, I got a letter. A real physical letter with a formal logo on the envelope. It was from the head of the history department at the state university. My hands trembled as I opened it. They had heard my podcast. A graduate student had found it and shared it with her professor. The letter said my work in preserving intangible cultural heritage, that's the beautiful academic term they used for our soup recipes and old tales and immigrant journeys, was remarkable and invaluable. They wanted to offer me a community fellowship. It came with a small stipend, a shared office space, and access to their archives to help me properly preserve and continue my work. They wanted to officially archive the Our Family Table collection for the university library for students and researchers to study for generations to come. I sat down hard in my kitchen chair. I read the letter 3 times. Then I cried. For the first time since that terrible night, I cried. Not tears of sadness, but tears of validation, of being seen. A local newspaper got wind of the story. They sent a lovely young journalist to my home. We sat at my kitchen table, and I made her ciorba de peresuare. She loved it. She wrote a beautiful front-page story for the weekend edition. My picture was in the paper. Me, Elena, from the small, simple house on Maple Street, smiling, holding one of my mother's old letters, being celebrated and honored for the very thing, the very passion my own daughter had called junk and a waste of time. The irony was so thick, so profound you could have cut it with a knife. I didn't feel vindicated, not in a triumphant way. I just felt seen, recognized. For the first time in a very, very long time, I felt like my life's work, my mother's legacy, mattered. It mattered to strangers, to academics, to the world. And that somehow made the ache of my daughter's rejection a little easier to bear. My daughter saw the article. A friend from high school had texted her a picture of it. "Isn't this your mom? This is so cool," the text reportedly said. I can only imagine the whirlwind of emotions that must have torn through her in that moment. The woman she had dismissed as living in the past was now being honored by a university. The old junk she had scorned was now being called invaluable cultural heritage. The passion she had ridiculed was now my credential. She didn't come back for money. She came to my door about a week later. I saw her car pull up and sit there for a long, long time before she finally got out. She looked different. The sharp, polished corporate armor was gone. Her shoulders were slumped. She looked young, vulnerable, and utterly exhausted. She rang the doorbell. I opened the door. I didn't smile, but I didn't shut the door in her face either. I just looked at her, waiting. "Mom," she said, her voice small. "Chloe," I replied, my tone neutral. Can I come in?" she asked, her eyes pleading. I stepped aside. She walked in, her posture defensive. We went to the living room and sat in our usual chairs. The silence was heavy, awkward, filled with the ghost of her terrible words. Finally, she spoke, not looking at me. "I saw the article. That's really amazing. Congratulations." "Thank you," I said quietly. She took a deep, shaky breath as if steeling herself for a plunge into cold water. "I got laid off, Mom. The merger, it finalized. They didn't need my entire department anymore. Just like that. 5 years of my life, my blood, my sweat, and I was given a severance check and a cardboard box with my desk plant in it." She tried to laugh, but it came out as a sob. "I'm sorry to hear that, Chloe," I said. And I was. I was sorry for her pain. Tears started to well in her eyes, spilling over and tracing paths through her makeup. And everyone at the office, my so-called friends, they all said, "Oh, you'll land on your feet. You're a star. You'll be snapped up in no time." But I sat in my apartment, that stupidly, obscenely expensive apartment that I can't afford now, and I looked at that severance check and I realized it was just a number in a bank account. It felt empty, completely meaningless. And I looked around and I realized I have nothing else. No foundation, no bedrock. I have no idea who I am, Mom. Without the job, without the title, without the salary, who am I? I watched her, my own heart breaking anew for the lost, frightened woman in front of me. But I remained still. I didn't rush to comfort her. She needed to sit in this feeling. She finally broke down, sobbing openly into her hands, her body shaking. The tough, impenetrable corporate facade had completely crumbled, revealing the scared, uncertain little girl I remembered from long ago. And the worst part, the very worst part, she cried, her voice muffled by her hands, is that I threw away the one thing that was real, the one thing that couldn't be taken away by a corporate merger or a bad economy. I told you, I said the most horrible, the most vile thing a person could ever say to their mother, and I am so sorry, Mom. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't deserve anything from you. I let the silence hang for a long moment, letting the weight of her confession, her raw pain settle in the room. She needed to understand. This wasn't just about an apology. "Chloe," I said, my voice soft but firm, carrying a weight of its own. "Look at me." She slowly, hesitantly looked up, her face streaked with tears and shame. "The inheritance I wanted to give you, it was never a thing. It's not a tablet full of files, or a lockbox of papers, or even a university fellowship. It's a story. A long, beautiful, complicated, painful, and glorious story of survival and love and sacrifice and resilience. And you are the next chapter. You are the live-in continuation of that story. This inheritance isn't a prize you get. It's not a handout. It's a story you choose to become a part of. You have to want to step into it. You have to want to pick up the pen and write your own chapter, informed by all the chapters that came before. You have to want it for the right reasons, not for fame or because a university recognized it, or out of guilt, but for you, for your own soul, for your own peace. She nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand, looking like a chastened child. I think, I think I'm starting to understand that now. I feel so unrooted, like a weed, blowing in the wind with no anchor. A small, gentle, genuine smile finally touched my lips. "A weed, my dear Chloe," I said, "is just a plant whose story you haven't learned yet." I stood up. I didn't go to the lockbox. That would have been too easy. Too much like handing over a finished product. Instead, I went to my desk, where I had been working just that morning. I picked up a single, fragile airmail letter, written in a flowing, elegant Romanian script that Chloe had never learned to read. I held it out to her. She took it as if it were made of the most delicate, thin glass. "This," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, "is a letter your great-grandmother Anka wrote to her sister Elena, for whom I was named. It was a year after she arrived here. She talks about how cold the winter is, how the wind cuts through her thin coat. She talks about how the bread here doesn't taste the same. It has no soul. And she writes about how she misses the sound of her sister's laughter most of all. It's sad and it's lonely and it's heartbreaking, but it's also beautiful because it's real. It's a testament to her love and her loneliness and her courage." Chloe looked down at the faded blue ink, the unfamiliar, beautiful script. She traced a word with her finger, a hesitant, humble gesture. It was the most vulnerable I had seen her in years. I I can't read it, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I know, I said softly, but I can teach you a few words. And we can start to translate it together, word by word, line by line. It's a slow process. It's not instant gratification. It takes patience, and it takes a willing heart. It takes a heart that is ready to listen. She looked up from the letter, her eyes meeting mine. They were full of a new, fragile, dawning hope. It wasn't the brash, confident look of the corporate climber. It was the soft, uncertain look of someone starting a long journey home. Mom? She asked, her voice small but clear. Would you, would it be okay if I helped you with this one? I want, I want to know what she said. I want to know what my great-grandmother was thinking and feeling. I think, I think I need to know. My eyes glistened with unshed tears. This, right here, was the true beginning. Not of forgiveness, that would take time, but of rebuilding, of rediscovery. This was the first small, quiet step onto a new path we would have to walk together. Yes, Chloe, I said, my voice cracking with emotion. I'd like that very much. Let's start here. You know, we spend so much of our lives chasing the shiny things, the loud things, the big promotions, the new car model, the perfect magazine cover house. We are taught from a young age that this is what success looks like. This is what we're supposed to strive for, and this is what we're supposed to leave behind for our children. And there's nothing inherently wrong with providing, with wanting a comfortable, secure life for yourself and your loved ones. Security is a gift in itself. But the real treasure, the one that lasts, the one that can comfort you in the deep dark of night when you've lost your job or your heart is broken or you feel utterly alone and adrift in the world, that treasure is the story. The story that whispers to you, you come from survivors. You come from people who crossed oceans with nothing but hope. You come from people who loved so deeply that their love echoes through generations. You are not alone. You belong to something bigger than yourself. Your life is a verse in a great, long, beautiful song. That knowledge, that connection, is a wealth that no bank can hold and no recession can diminish. That is the real inheritance. And it's a gift that only grows more valuable, more abundant, the more you choose to share it. So, to all of you who have been sitting at our family table with me today, thank you. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for sharing this time with me. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think of your own grandmother, or your mother, or your father, or a story from your own family that's begging to be told, then do me a favor. Share this video. Share it with someone you love. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. Let's start a movement. Let's remind each other what's truly, deeply, lastingly valuable in this brief and beautiful life of ours. And I would be so honored if you would leave a comment below. Tell me one small thing you remember from your family's history. It doesn't have to be grand. It could be the smell of your grandfather's pipe tobacco, the song your mother used to hum while she cooked, a silly saying your father always repeated, a recipe for a cookie that only your family makes. Let's build a feast of memories together in the comments. Let's create our own great, big, beautiful family table right here. And please, if you feel so moved, hit that subscribe button. By subscribing, you're pulling up a chair and saying you want to be part of this community, because there are so many more stories where this one came from, Stories of love, of heartbreaking loss, of recipes that saved a life during hard times, and letters that crossed oceans and wars to find their way home. This table, my friends, has plenty of room. The soup pot is always full, the bread is always warm, and there's always a seat saved just for you. Until next time, from my family table to yours, keep your stories close. Tell them to your children. Write them down. Record them. Cherish them. And don't ever let anyone tell you they're just junk. They are not junk. They are the gold, the real, enduring, priceless gold that outlasts every fortune, that shines long after all other lights have gone out.